A plume of emerald smoke erupted from Cybil's workshop window, momentarily eclipsing the luminescent glow emanating from Lumina's ever-pulsating heart, the Everforge. A chorus of startled yelps rose from the bustling street below, followed by the irritated squawk of a particularly irate lumabird perched precariously on a nearby chimney. Inside, Cybil coughed, waving a hand dismissively at the haze that swirled around her flaming hair. "Just a minor alchemical overenthusiasm, Grug," she called out, her voice tinged with a hint of smoke and pride. "Nothing to worry about." From a tangle of gears and wires beneath a workbench overflowing with beakers and bubbling concoctions, emerged a disgruntled Grug. His soot-stained overalls and perpetually furrowed brow did little to hide the mischievous glint in his mismatched eyes. "Minor overenthusiasm, you say?" he grumbled, wiping a smear of grease across his forehead. "Last time it was minor overenthusiasm we ended up with a flock of singed pigeons and a rather disgruntled Royal Guard captain." Cybil grinned, a glint of mischief matching Grug's. "Ah, but that was merely an unfortunate side effect of my revolutionary method of aerial propulsion. This, however," she gestured dramatically towards a contraption resembling a giant, iridescent dragonfly with whirring gears for wings, "is the future of Lumina's air travel." Grug snorted. "Future of setting the entire city on fire, more likely. Queen Lumina specifically requested inventors with a proven track record for this Everforge competition, not alchemists who can't tell a vial of glow dust from a bottle of goblin nose grease." Cybil bristled. "My alchemy is far more precise than you give it credit for, Grug. This is my chance to prove everyone, especially you, wrong. Lumina needs a new kind of inventor, Grug. One who understands the subtle language of elements, not just the brute force of gears and cogs." Grug eyed the dragonfly contraption with skepticism, then sighed. "Fine. But if this whole thing ends in another smoke show, I'm blaming your fiery enthusiasm, not the faulty wiring." Cybil clapped him on the back, sending a puff of emerald smoke into the air. "Excellent! Now, hand me that vial of luminescence, and let's get to work. Lumina needs a hero, and that hero, my friend, is about to be crowned the city's first clockwork alchemist." The truth was, Grug cared about a good paycheck about as much as a goblin cared for a bath. Sure, coin jingling in his pockets was great, and a full belly was a happy belly, but his reasons for sticking with Cybil ran deeper than that. He'd first stumbled into her workshop years ago, a greasy, soot-covered mess of a goblin desperate for a job. Cybil, with her fiery hair and even fiercer spirit, had taken him in without a question. Back then, Lumina hadn't been on the brink of an energy crisis. Back then, the Everforge hummed with a steady power, its light painting the city in a warm, golden glow. Grug had watched, fascinated, as Cybil tinkered with her potions and concoctions, her touch seemingly coaxing a strange magic from the very air. He'd never understood the intricacies of her alchemy, but he'd seen the results. Vibrant dyes that shimmered with an otherworldly sheen, elixirs that could soothe a troll's grumpy stomach or mend a broken wing in a matter of moments. Over the years, a silent bond had formed between them. Grug, with his knack for taking apart and rebuilding anything with gears and springs, became Cybil's anchor to the world of metal and mechanics. He may not have understood the language of elements, but he spoke the language of levers and pistons fluently. Together they were a mismatched pair, but their skills complemented each other perfectly. Grug cared about Lumina more than he cared to admit. He'd grown accustomed to the gentle hum of the Everforge, the soft glow that bathed the city in a comforting light. He'd seen the despair in the citizens' eyes when the Everforge sputtered, the fear that crept in with the encroaching shadows. He wouldn't let that happen again. So, when Cybil announced the Clockwork Alchemist competition, a different kind of fire ignited in Grug's chest. It wasn't the avarice for a bigger coin purse, but a fierce protectiveness for the city that had become his home, a loyalty forged in the shared laughter and late nights spent hunched over workbenches, a silent promise to the woman who'd given him a chance when no one else would. He wouldn't just be working alongside Cybil this time, he'd be fighting for Lumina, for the woman who was more than just a partner, and for the city that shone a little less brightly without the Everforge's full power. With renewed vigor, the pair set to work. Cybill's nimble fingers danced over her alchemical apparatus, mixing potions and powders with the grace of a conductor leading an orchestra. The room was a cacophony of sounds, bubbling flasks, whirring gears, and the occasional hiss of a pressure-release valve. Meanwhile, Grug tinkered with the mechanical underbelly of the dragonfly, his goblin instincts for engineering sharper than any elven blade. Cybill's connection to alchemy wasn't something she could easily explain. It wasn't a skill passed down through generations, nor was it a formal education gleaned from dusty scrolls in the Grand Library. It felt more like an inherent pull, a deep understanding of the elements that resonated within her very being. Some whispered it was a touch of the Everforge's magic itself, a spark of its creative energy that flowed through her veins. Whenever Cybil held a vial of shimmering lumablim essence, or stirred a bubbling concoction of gear smoke and moonstone dust, she felt a connection to the city's heart. It was as if the Everforge's rhythmic pulse echoed within her, guiding her hand and whispering secrets of transformation. This innate talent often left others bewildered, but for Cybil, it was as natural as breathing. Days turned into nights, and the looming moonrise grew ever closer. Cybill's eyes grew dark with circles, but her spirit remained undeterred. They had to find a way to revitalize the Everforge, to restore the light that was Lumina's lifeblood. The city was counting on them. On the eve of the competition, a messenger arrived, cloaked in shadows. He handed Cybil a rolled parchment, the seal of the royal house stamped with the emblem of a radiant sun. Her heart fluttered as she broke the seal and unfurled the scroll. It was an invitation to the royal ball, a celebration to honor the contestants. But as she read the fine print, her smile faltered. The queen had also requested a demonstration of their invention at the ball. Panic set in. The dragonfly was nowhere near ready, and the Everforge's energy crisis was reaching a critical point. The streets grew dimmer with each passing hour. Cybil looked at Grug, her eyes wide with fear. "We're out of time," she whispered. Grug grunted, wiping his greasy hands on a rag. "Then we'll just have to make time, won't we?" He slammed his fist on the workbench, sending a cascade of springs and screws into the air. "No pressure, right?" The two worked through the night, fueled by a mix of desperation and determination. The dragonfly took shape before their eyes, its wings shimmering with the promise of flight. The Everforge's whispers grew fainter, but the urgency in their hearts grew louder. As the first rays of dawn pierced the workshop windows, Cybil and Grug stepped back, panting. Is it done?" Cybil asked, her voice quivering. Grug nodded, a rare smile spreading across his face. "It's not pretty, but it'll fly. And it'll be the talk of the ball, mark my words." With the fate of Lumina resting on their shoulders, they loaded the dragonfly into a cart and set off towards the royal palace, the anticipation thick in the air like the scent of rain before a storm. As they approached the grand gates, the whispers grew into a murmur, then a roar. The crowd had gathered to see the spectacle that was about to unfold. But as they rolled through the streets, the murmur grew into a gasp. Above the city, a new plume of smoke billowed, thick and black, unlike any they had ever seen. It wasn't the emerald hue of Cybil's alchemy, nor the steamy exhale of Lumina's geothermal engines. This smoke was malevolent, a harbinger of the Smog King's presence. Their hearts racing, Cybil and Grug exchanged a look that spoke volumes. The competition was no longer about personal triumph, it was about saving their home. They had to find the source of this dark energy, and fast. The Everforge's malfunction was no accident, it was a deliberate attack on the very essence of Lumina. The clock was ticking, and the game had just changed. Cybil's stomach clenched as they approached the royal palace, the dark plume of smoke looming like a malevolent specter in the sky. The Everforge's dwindling light cast eerie shadows across the city, and the once vibrant streets of Lumina were suffocated by a sense of dread. The dragonfly in tow, they pushed through the throngs of anxious elves and goblins whispering about the impending doom. "We can't just ignore it, Cybil," said Grug, his eyes never leaving the plume. "We need to investigate before the ball." "But the Queen expects us," she protested, tugging at the hem of her tarnished gown. "We can't disappoint her." Grug's expression was firm. "We can't disappoint the city. If the Smog King's behind this, We're the only ones who might stand a chance. The words hung heavy in the air, and with a solemn nod, Cybil agreed. They turned the cart around, the clatter of gears and wheels echoing through the deserted streets. The dragonfly's wings glinted in the dull light, a beacon of hope amidst the encroaching gloom. Their journey took them to the outskirts of Lumina, where the grandeur of the city's clockwork spires gave way to a sprawling industrial area. The stench of burning coal and metal grew stronger, and the air grew thick with a film of greasy ash. Factories lay dormant, their chimneys silent, as if in mourning for the Everforge's dwindling power. As they approached the heart of the industrial district, a monstrous structure emerged from the haze. It was a fortress of steel and soot, belching out the noxious fumes that blighted the sky. Above the gates, a sign creaked ominously, "The Smog King's Dominion." The dragonfly's wings hummed to life, and Cybil felt a rush of adrenaline. "We're going in," she declared, her hand resting on the dragonfly's gleaming side. Grug checked the mechanical beast's straps one last time before climbing aboard. "Just remember," he said gruffly, "if things go sideways, you're the brains, I'm the brawn." With a silent nod, they took to the skies, the dragonfly's wings slicing through the murky air like a knife through warm butter. The fortress grew closer, its metal spikes and grinding gears a stark contrast to the organic beauty of Lumina. As they approached, the gates slammed open, revealing a hangar filled with mechanical monstrosities that defied description, each emitting its own toxic cloud. The Smog King's lair was alive with activity, his minions scurrying about like ants around a rotting apple. Cybil's eyes widened as she took in the sight, her mind racing with the implications. The Smog King's power was not just a rumor, it was a terrifying reality. They had to be careful. One wrong move and they could be spotted, and their mission would be over before it began. Cybil whispered a command into the dragonfly's ear, and it descended silently into the fortress, tucking into a shadowy corner. The next few hours were a blur of stealth and discovery. They sneaked through corridors, dodged patrols, and hacked into terminals, piecing together the Smog King's nefarious plan. The stolen geothermal energy was being used to power a doomsday device, capable of extinguishing the Everforge for good. Time was running out. Cybil's hands trembled as she mixed a potent alchemical brew with ingredients from her pocket, a concoction she hoped would disable the machine. They had to get closer. Much closer. With a final nod to each other, they set off into the bowels of the fortress, the dragonfly's wings folded in stealth mode. The Everforge's final whispers grew faint in the distance, a fading ember in the shadow of the Smog King's tyranny. The air grew thick with tension, each step echoing through the metal corridors like a silent scream for help. They reached the control room, a cavernous chamber where a monstrous contraption loomed, its tentacle-like pipes writhing like serpents around the stolen geothermal core. The machine's hunger for power was palpable, the very air crackling with the malicious intent of its master. Cybil's gaze locked onto the core, her heart racing. This was it. The lifeblood of Lumina, held hostage by the Smog King's greed. She could feel the heat of the city's desperation in her veins, spurring her onward. Grug took up a defensive position by the door, his eyes darting to the screens displaying the city's dwindling light. Cybil approached the core, her breath hitching as she unscrewed the cap to her flask. The potion inside shimmered with the promise of Lumina's salvation, a swirl of blues and greens that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the city's beating heart. With trembling hands, she poured the potion into the energy conduit, whispering an incantation under her breath. The core responded with a sizzle, the metal hissing in protest. The pipes began to tremble, and the room vibrated with the sudden surge of power. The screens flickered to life, alarms blaring like a cacophony of angry beasts. The Smog King's minions, alerted to the intrusion, swarmed towards them. Cybil's eyes never left the core as the potion did its work, the dragonfly's wings fluttering anxiously in the background. And then, a miracle. The core's pulse grew stronger, the energy flowing back into the Everforge, a beacon of hope in the ashen sky. The alarms fell silent, the pipes stilled, and the machine groaned before falling dark. They raced out of the fortress, while Grug let out a bellow of triumph, slamming the door shut just as the first wave of guards arrived. "Time to go!" They sprinted through the corridors, dodging the onslaught of the Smog King's minions. Cybil clutched the dragonfly's reins tightly, her mind racing. They had to reach the royal ball, to warn the queen and the city. The dragonfly took to the air once more, weaving through the smog-choked streets. The Everforge's light grew stronger with every beat of its wings, piercing the twilight like a defiant cry. Cybil's heart pounded in her chest as she steered the contraption towards the royal palace, the stolen energy of Lumina now surging back to its rightful place. They burst through the ballroom's open windows, the dragonfly's wings casting a kaleidoscope of colors across the astonished faces of the high-born elves and goblins. The music stuttered to a halt, and the chatter of the assembly died down as all eyes fell upon the unlikely heroes. "Your Highness!" Cybil called out, her voice ringing with urgency. "The Everforge has been sabotaged. The Smog King seeks to claim Lumina's power!" The room was a tableau of shock and disbelief, until Queen Lumina rose from her throne, her eyes gleaming with a mix of worry and determination. "Guards to the Everforge!" she ordered, her voice a clarion call to action. "We must protect the heart of our city!" But the Queen's words were cut short by the trembling of the ground beneath their feet. The Everforge's light flickered, threatening to wink out entirely. Cybil's eyes widened in horror. "It's too late!" she gasped. "We must act now!" The dragonfly, a symbol of hope amidst the chaos, grew brighter, its wings emitting a warm glow that seemed to infuse the very air with strength. Cybil knew what she had to do. With a deep breath, she flung the last of her potion into the dragonfly's cockpit, whispering the final incantation. The contraption shuddered, and for a heart-stopping moment, Cybil feared she had made a grave mistake. But then, with a roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of Lumina, the dragonfly's wings exploded with light, sending a wave of energy crashing through the city. The Everforge's light steadied, grew stronger, and soon the entire city was bathed in its warm embrace once more. The crowd erupted in cheers, the sound echoing through the night like the peal of 1,000 bells. But the battle was not yet won. The Smog King's fortress loomed in the distance, a stark reminder of the enemy that lurked just beyond their borders. Cybil and Grug shared a look, the unspoken understanding passing between them. The true test was yet to come. With newfound resolve, they turned the dragonfly towards the smog-covered horizon. The Queen's voice followed them as they soared away from the palace. "Go forth, my brave alchemist and mechanic. Defend Lumina, and may the light of the Everforge guide you to victory." The city grew smaller beneath them, the cheers fading into the whistle of the wind. But Cybil's spirit soared with the dragonfly, fueled by the love of her city and the unshakable belief in her own abilities. Together she and Grug would face the Smog King and his mechanical monstrosities, and restore the balance to their world. The journey ahead was fraught with danger, but Cybil felt a fierce excitement surging through her. For she knew that with her alchemy and Grug's mechanical prowess, they could overcome any obstacle. They were the guardians of Lumina, and the future of their city was in their hands. As they approached the Smog King's fortress once more, the dragonfly's light grew more intense, piercing the dark clouds that shrouded the city. The streets below were a blur of life and motion, the citizens of Lumina rallying to the Everforge's call. The city was alive, and the Everforge's power pulsed through its veins like lifeblood. Grug tightened his grip on the dragonfly's frame, his knuckles white. "We can't just storm in there, Cybil," he yelled over the wind. "We need a plan." Cybil nodded, her eyes narrowed in concentration. "We'll find a weakness, something we can exploit." They circled the fortress, searching for an opening. Obviously, it would not be as easy as the previous visit. The walls were a mix of steel and dark magic that seemed to absorb the light around them. But as they flew closer, a glint of red caught Cybil's eye. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible flaw in the fortress's armor, a crack in the energy field that surrounded the building. "There!" she pointed. "That's our way back in." Grug's expression was grim, but he didn't argue. He knew Cybil's instincts were rarely wrong. They dove towards the crack, the dragonfly's wings beating a fierce rhythm. The fortress's defenses buzzed with alarm, but they were too quick. Once inside, The air was thick with the stench of burning coal and despair. The Smog King's minions patrolled the corridors, their eyes glowing with an eerie light. Cybil and Grug moved with the precision of seasoned warriors, dodging patrols and disarming traps with a grace that belied their haste. They reached the heart of the fortress, where the stolen geothermal core was being held. The Smog King himself stood before them, a hulking figure in a coat of black steam-powered armor, his face obscured by a mask of gleaming brass. "You dare to challenge me?" His voice was a deep, rumbling growl that seemed to come from the very depths of the earth. Cybil stepped forward, her eyes blazing with the light of the Everforge. "We come to reclaim what is rightfully ours and to save our city from your tyranny." The Smog King sneered, raising a hand to summon his minions. But Cybil was faster. She flung a handful of glowing dust into the air, creating a whirlwind of light that sent the minions reeling. Grug charged, his wrench raised like a weapon. The Smog King was strong, but he was no match for the goblin's brute force. The two clashed, sparks flying as metal met metal. Cybil, meanwhile, searched for a way to free the core. Her eyes fell upon a series of levers and gears, a puzzle that whispered of the Everforge's own inner workings. Her heart raced as she connected the dots, her mind spinning with the alchemical knowledge that had always set her apart. With a flick of her wrist, she pulled a lever. The floor beneath them shifted, and the core began to rise, the energy flowing back towards Lumina. The Smog King roared in anger, but it was too late. The dragonfly's light grew brighter, filling the room with a warm, golden glow. The Smog King staggered back, his armor steaming and hissing. "You may have won this battle," he spat, "but the war is far from over." Cybil and Grug didn't wait to hear the rest. They leaped onto the dragonfly, the core in tow, and shot back through the crack in the fortress's defenses. The Smog King's roars of rage echoed in their wake as they soared over the city, the Everforge's light growing stronger with every beat of the dragonfly's wings. They landed at the base of the Everforge, the dragonfly's glow dimming as it transferred its energy back into the city's heart. The crowd that had gathered to watch their return erupted in cheers. The Queen was there, a smile of relief and pride on her face. "Well done," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You have restored the light to Lumina." Cybil felt a weight lift from her shoulders. But even as the city's lights grew bright, she knew that the battle was not yet won. The Smog King would not rest until he had claimed Lumina's power for himself. With the core secure, they turned to face the Everforge. The great machine's light had returned, but it was weak, like a candle flickering in a gale. Cybil knew they had to act quickly to stabilize it. She instructed the dragonfly to hover in place, its wings providing a protective barrier around the core. Grug leaped into action, his goblin strength and mechanical intuition coming into play as he worked alongside the city's best engineers. They toiled tirelessly, their hands a blur of motion as they reconnected the core to the Everforge's intricate system of gears and pipes. Cybil hovered over them, her eyes darting between the machinery and the dragonfly's dwindling light. The moment the final connection was made, the Everforge roared back to life, the light flooding Lumina once more. The crowd below erupted in a thunderous cheer that seemed to resonate with the very earth beneath them. The city was alive again, its streets bathed in a warm, golden glow that chased away the shadows of the smog. The Queen approached, her eyes gleaming with a mix of relief and determination. "The Smog King's threat is not over," she said gravely. "But tonight, we have shown that the light of Lumina cannot be so easily extinguished." Cybil felt a surge of pride. "We'll be ready for him, Your Highness," she vowed. "Grug and I will not rest until he is brought to justice." The Queen placed a hand on her shoulder. "Your bravery and ingenuity have earned you both a place in Lumina's history. You are hereby appointed the Royal Clockwork Alchemists, guardians of our city's heart." The crowd's cheers grew deafening as Cybil and Grug were showered with confetti and the adoration of their people. But amidst the celebration, the shadow of the Smog King's looming threat remained. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. As the night grew late, and the festivities wound down, Cybil and Grug retreated to their workshop, already planning their next move. The dragonfly, now a symbol of hope, rested in the corner, its wings folded like a sentinel watching over the city. The Smog King's retribution was inevitable, but they were ready. Their friendship had been forged in the fires of adversity, and together, they had become more than just inventors. They were Lumina's protectors, the guardians of the Everforge's light. The days that followed were a whirlwind of strategy meetings, training sessions, and further tinkering. Cybil's alchemy and Grug's mechanics grew stronger, each feeding off the other's knowledge and passion. They designed new weapons and defenses, all the while keeping a vigilant eye on the horizon, waiting for the next plume of smoke that would signal the Smog King's return. And when it did come, they would be ready. The Everforge's light was theirs to protect, and they would not let it falter again. Together, they would stand as a bastion against the encroaching darkness, a beacon of hope in a world that had grown too accustomed to twilight. The story of Cybil and Grug had only just begun, a tale of light versus shadow, of science and magic intertwined. And as they worked into the night, the whispers of the city's gratitude echoing in their ears, they knew that their greatest inventions were still to come. For they were the clockwork alchemists, and the future of Lumina was in their hands. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider subscribing to stay updated with our latest stories, give us a like if you want to see more, and drop a comment below to let us know your thoughts.